from 95.3 WBEV, powered by Daily Dodge. The following program is a paid presentation of Jung Garden Center. The views and opinions expressed are not necessarily those of Good Karma Brands, WBEV, its management, or its employees. It is time now for the Garden Doctor. Here is your host, Justin the Ninja Wilski.
And welcome into Taking Care of Business today. Of course, we are sitting down with Dick, the Garden Doctor. Dick with Jung's, of course, and multiple locations now. Dick, where are you guys located all around at?
Yeah, we have two stores in Madison, one in Sun Prairie, one in Stoughton, one in Stevens Point, and then headquarters in Randolph.
There you go. And I've been to the Randolph location. I love that store. Beautiful store. Of course, people can stop in there anytime to not just peruse,
right,
but also to, ask questions if they need to. Of course, we bring you on all the time. We love to have you on in the spring and the fall. Of course, it is now spring. Let's look outside.
Yep. I guess it is the first day of spring, but it's kind of white out there now. So, we've had some nice weather before, and hopefully we'll have a lot of nice weather after.
I've had quite a few people where I told them I was doing this show today already, and they've reached out to me and said, they do know it's not yet spring, right? And I said, well, better now to start thinking about this than when it's too late.
Yeah. We're actually opening the Beirut room tomorrow. It may be a slight bit early for it. I mean, you want to have the frost out of the ground and the excess water have moved through. But the Beirut material can be purchased tomorrow and held for 2 to 3 weeks in a garage where you just put some moisture in the packing material that we put around the root system, and then 24 hours before you are going to plant the material, you put the roots in a bucket of water with the root stimulator in it, and that way the roots can take up as much water as possible without doing a lot of damage, because the roots of a plant have to breathe as well as the tops. And so you want to, by putting them in water, they're outside of the air. But you want to get as much water into the root system as possible without injuring it. And so 24 hours before you're going to plant, you just stick it in a bucket of water, and then when you're planting it, you dig a hole big enough, probably a little bit bigger than what the root system is. You enrich the soil with compost or peat moss or sand if you've got a very heavy clay soil, and then put the soil. Plant the plants about the same depth that they were in the nursery, and you can tell that pretty much by the color of the bark. Where the bark gets lighter, it's probably been underground. And so a good rule of thumb is at the depth that it was planted, because there are some plants that are susceptible to being planted too deep. And so like birch and raspberries for sure, if you plant them 6 inches deeper than they were in the nursery, you're probably not going to have very good success.
I definitely know that works, your advice there, because you brought into us before some, I don't know if they were dormant or if they're just bare root rose plants. Mm-hmm. And I was able to take a couple of those home, followed your advice, got them planted, and ever since they've looked beautiful in the front of the house.
Yep.
So can't argue with that. Do you want to remind people, if you want to talk to the Garden Doctor, ask him a question, you can give us a call or text. Give us a call at 885-4446. Or you can call us at 887-9595, which is also our text line. And the Garden Doctor, of course, will be more than happy to answer your questions. So bare root room opening tomorrow.
Right.
And I know when I think about this and I look outside, and again, I think, who's doing anything in the greenhouse? But you guys have been busy for a while now leading up to
that. The greenhouses are filling up pretty fast now. Time to get the seed started. And actually, seeds are pretty easy. Most seeds are pretty easy to get started. All you really need is a clean medium, and my favorite is Jiffy Mix, but we have several different peat-based starting mixes at the garden center. You get that moist so that the seeds can imbibe the water. And then you place the seeds on top of that moist medium and cover them with a little bit. And then you stick them in a plastic bag, or you put plastic over them so that that water stays in the area. And then if you really want to be good to the seeds, you put them on a heat mat. Because a soil temperature of 68 to 72 degrees, the seeds will start much faster and will come up much more uniformly than if they're not just set on a bench or a table somewhere. And because the air temperature is at 72 or 70 degrees, it doesn't mean that the medium is going to be at that temperature. Right. And so having a heat mat or having them in a spot where you get heat coming up through the bottom is quite essential. All of our seeds are started on heated tables so that they come up more uniformly, and you can tell, we know exactly how many days it takes for a certain seed to start. The other thing you want to do, though, too, is because seeds do start at different speeds, don't want to put tomatoes and peppers and eggplant and geraniums and things in one flat, because the tomatoes and the peppers, the tomatoes and maybe your cole crops like cabbage and cauliflower will come up in 3 to 4 days, where peppers and some of the others take a week to 10 days. And so what you want to do is, as soon as the seedlings are out of the ground, you want to take them out of the plastic bag and put them in a cool, sunny window, because damping off is a real problem. Even in a clean soil, it comes in with the water, or it can come in the air. And if you keep them in that moist, warm condition, that's the same conditions that those spores like to germinate. And right. If you get the damping off starting, it looks like the plants are wilting, and so you water more, and that actually is doing the exact wrong thing, because you want to let those root systems dry out a little bit. So once they're out of the ground and they're on that cool, sunny window, you want to feel the medium, and if it's dry, you want to water it good and heavy, and then wait until it feels dry again, not water on a daily basis or right. every other day, because you want those seedlings to get out of that moist, warm condition so that the damping off does not become a problem.
Right. I see we have a call on line one, so we're going to go ahead and go to the phones. Hello, caller. You're on with the Garden Doctor.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I enjoy your show. I learn something every time. I was wondering, can I still put manure on the garden yet? Because I'll be working it up probably another month or so, because it's too cold now yet.
Yep.
And then work it in. And I have access to horse manure, cow manure, and sheep manure. Is there one better than the other?
Not really, but the well composted manure is much better than the fresh manure, because the fresh manure has a lot of nitrogen in it, and too much nitrogen in a vegetable gardening will cause the plants to grow like crazy, but it delays fruiting, or it will interfere. So if you're going to put fresh manure on, just put a thin layer and then work that in. But if you've got a manure that's been sitting in the yard for over winter or even a little longer, that's the best kind, because that way a lot of the nitrogen has either been leached out of the manure or has dissipated in the air, and that compost then will do a lot of good for your garden.
Yeah, everything that I have access to is older, a year or 2 years old. So.
Oh yeah, that's the best kind of manure that you can add to a garden, and just work it into the top 6 or 8 inches, and that will improve the soil texture. It will improve the nutrient holding capacity and the water holding capacity. So, yeah, I'm a strong advocate of compost or well-rotted manure, or different additives that you can put in the soil to get it to a nice.
One is not better than the other.
No,
Oh,
No,
okay.
all manures are about the same.
Somebody said that the sheep manure, they actually eat up the seeds and stuff more. You don't have as many weeds. Is that true?
It depends on what the animal ate. You know, if they eat weedy hay or you know, any kind of feed that has weed seed in it. The weed seed has a very hard seed coat on it and will go through the digestive tract and come out the other end.
Okay.
And so sometimes in the composting of the manure, it will get rid of some of the weed seed, but no. And as far as the only manure that's really, really hot is chicken manure.
Oh,
So, yeah, that has a lot of nitrogen in it. So that definitely has to be run through the composting. And you know, with hay or straw or grass clippings or anything like that, if you can mix manure with that and let it sit over the winter, you'll have beautiful compost for your garden.
oh, okay. Thank you much.
Yep. Thanks
There
for
you go.
calling. Yep.
Thank you, caller. And we actually have another call already on line 2. Hello, you're on with the Garden Doctor.
Hi, I have 2 questions about houseplants. Sorry, it's not
Okay.
outside. I have a Christmas cactus I have had for a long time,
Right.
and all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but in the last couple months, it's looking very limp, where before the leaves are very, what do I want to...
Sort of wilted. Yep.
Yeah, now they're wilted. Before they were twice the size and they were very green and looked very healthy. I didn't think I was overwatering it. I did give it a shot of Miracle Grow, but it doesn't seem to be coming around. So I just stopped watering it. Do you have any ideas?
Okay. A lot of the houseplants go dormant in the wintertime, and therefore they will look a little peaked as they come out. My recommendation with houseplants is to water them a minimum amount in the wintertime when they're dormant. And then now's the time that the day length is getting longer, and the plants will sense that. And once the days get to a certain length, then the plant will start putting out new growth, and that's when you really want to water and fertilize them. You don't
Okay,
want
I
to
have it
fertilize them too much in the winter because it may cause them to think it's time to grow, and it's really not time to grow. So
Oh, yeah, I've had this for a long time, and it's the first time it's actually looked like this. So
what I would do with it is put it in a sunny window. And like I said, now's the time the plants are going to start growing. So maybe now's the time to give it a good shot of fertilizer and put it in a sunny window, and I think you'll be fine.
Okay. And my other question is to start clippings from geraniums. Do you
Right.
just stick them right in the dirt? I've always stuck them in water to get them rooted, but I have some going and they're not looking like they want to root, but they look very healthy.
Yeah, the best thing to use for rooting geranium cuttings is Jiffy Sevens. It's a peat pellet that you put in water, and it swells up, and those things really work well for rooting geraniums. The problem with rooting them in water is even if they do root, the roots that you'll get in a water situation are not the same type of roots that you get when a plant is in a peat type soil. So the best way to root geranium cuttings is to use like a seed starting mix that has, that doesn't have garden soil in it, and then keep it moist, and then put a plastic bag over the geraniums and over the cuttings, and that will keep a high humidity in that area underneath the plastic. The other thing is using a rooting hormone on the cutting before you stick it in the peat moss also helps.
Okay. I heard you say that seeds need a certain temperature before they'll germinate. I started kohlrabi seeds, tomato seeds, and pepper seeds, all in different things, but in the same window. my kohlrabi is already up, but the other ones aren't even sticking through the dirt.
Yeah, the kohlrabi, any of the kale cole crops, that would be cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts. Those particular seeds germinate sometimes almost overnight. So they're very, very fast at coming. The tomatoes tomatoes are
Apples?
fairly rapid, but not as fast as the cole crops. And then the peppers and some of the others are a little bit longer. Eggplants take a little bit longer. But
I don't know.
how long
me,
have
it
they been
seems
in the?
Let me look. To me, it just seems like I'm losing my touch. I don't know.
Did you put them in a plastic bag so that the moisture?
I have saran wrap over top, so
Okay.
it's like a thing. Peppers, I started. I didn't say peppers on 3-4. Nothing
Okay.
sticking through. And where did I do it? My tomatoes. I think I started my tomatoes about the same time. I must have taken them down.
Yeah, they should be coming any time now. It's about time that they start peaking up.
Okay, I have them in a south window, but this room up here is not 70 degrees. So
Yeah.
I was just wondering if that's my problem.
Yeah, it is because like I said, if the medium is warm, tomatoes can be out of the ground in 5 or 6 days.
Okay,
If
yeah,
it's
because I was
cold, if
surprised.
it's if it's cold, then it just takes them a little longer.
I was surprised my kohlrabi's come up so soon and nothing else is popping up. So thank you very much for your time, sir.
Oh, you're very
and
welcome.
thank you for your program.
Yep.
And thank you for your call. We actually are going to go back to the phones. Caller, you're on with the Garden Doctor.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for taking my call. Quick question on a 20-year-old peace plant that is westerly facing near a window. I've had some problems with the leaves turning, curling, and dying. I thought it was I was underwatering it or overwatering, so then I cut it back, and then it wasn't getting better, so then I put water in and cut the dead growth off, so I'm at a loss what to do.
Okay. Right now, what's happening, and I think I described that a little while a caller ago, that the plants are starting to think it's time to start growing, and what happens is it will pull nutrients and things out of the older leaves if it doesn't have enough nutrients in the soil, and then those leaves will start to curl and start to turn yellow. So I don't know. Have you had it in the same pot for that long?
No, it's a much larger one, probably about the size of a basketball.
Okay. So the peace lilies, they do like to get root bound, but if you've had it in the same pot for more than 3 or 4 years, it's probably time to transplant it. And now would be a great time to do that because by doing that, it'll stimulate it to start growing. And now is when the houseplants are starting to sense that it's time to grow. And a lot of people will think that the plant is dying because there will be a lot of yellowing of the foliage and things like that happening. And it's just a matter that leaves don't last forever. They usually on houseplants will last for a year or two, and then they'll start senescing, and the new growth out of the top is taking the nutrients out of those leaves to support the new growth.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much for the information.
Yep. Thank you for calling.
All right. And it looks like we might. No, we don't have another call. Okay. Thanks, Kale. Let's dive into what you were talking about there a little bit. One, you were mentioning using the soil as an indicator when it comes to like seed starting.
Right.
Saying, don't just base it on whether the plant looks like it's growing, not growing, whatever, but really check that medium.
Yeah, because the damping off fungus is called a water mold. It likes moist, warm conditions, and that's the same type of thing that you're doing if you're overwatering your plants. If you're keeping them, if you're keeping the soil constantly plugged with water, the roots aren't breathing, and it's a perfect breeding ground for the microorganisms that are root rotting things. So it's best with houseplants to feel the soil, and if it feels dry, water it heavy, and then let it dry out between waterings.
That ties into the next topic we want to talk about a little bit, which was transplanting, which that's something you should be doing potentially, like maybe annually, twice a year, or every 2 years, 3 years with house plants. Like, is that a normal thing?
It depends on. Sorry, I'm just getting over a
Oh, you're
cold.
good.
It depends on how root bound the plant is. If it's been in the same pot for maybe 2 years or 3 years, and you can see a lot of the roots at the top of the soil, you know it's time to transplant them. And what you want to do is get a pot that's at least 3 or 4 inches wider than the pot it's coming out of. And then when you take the plant out of the old pot, take a sharp knife and cut into that root ball.
Okay.
And what that does is it stimulates the roots to grow out of the, it'll be circling that pot, and it'll stimulate the roots to grow out into that new soil and will encourage the plant to grow.
I mean, obviously, when we think about plants out out in the wild, the roots can kind of go as far as they want to go, almost
Right.
unobstructed.
Right.
But when we put them in a pot, they're limited.
Right.
Do the roots ever stop growing?
No, they don't. They just keep going round and round in the pots or in a container. They'll just fill that container up with roots, and we grow a lot of nursery stock in pots, and most of that nursery stock, if it's been in a pot for more than 2 years, we'll throw them away because they're too root bound, and you want to have good roots, new roots that are coming out that will blast out into the native soil so that the plant doesn't girdle itself by just keeping going around. And that's why when you're transplanting potted nursery stock too, we always tell people that they have to be tough with those root balls, because if they're root bound when they plant it and you just stick it in a hole and put soil around it, most of the soils that the soils that we use, or I think the soils that some of the nurseries that we purchase some of the unusual things from, they grow them in pretty nutrient-rich soil, and so the plants will want to stay in that nutrient-rich zone, and so you've got to kind of get them to blast out into the native soil, and the way you do that is you sometimes just take a hatchet or a carpet knife and just cut into that root ball an inch or so, which cuts those roots and stimulates them. And if you dig it up maybe in 2 or 3 weeks, you'd see all those nice white roots coming out of those areas where the incisions have been made, and that's what you want. You want those roots to blast out into the native soil.
Encouraging that growth, that makes a lot of sense. Now, if I'm transplanting, I've got a few house plants that I want to move into bigger pots, or maybe I get a new pot. I like,
Sure.
people like decorative pots and things
Sure.
now. If I'm transplanting over, should I be looking at getting new medium, or that bag I've had sitting in my garage for 3 years that I've been weeding through? Is that still going to be okay to use? Is that
Oh
still
yeah,
good for
I mean,
me?
if it's dry,
Right.
If it hasn't, if it hasn't gotten wet, if it is wet, there's a good possibility that there's fungus and things like that growing in it. But if it's completely dry, there's no reason that you shouldn't use it, even if it's 2 or 3 years old.
Should we be looking at doing some sort of fertilizing or feeding in that time to help
Of
encourage
course,
that?
yeah, that's what you do when especially in the springtime at the beginning of a growing season. It's time to get out there and fertilize things. Like with your lawns too. I mean, it's too early to go out and fertilize a lawn right now. I mean,
Right.
the grass is dead, or not dead, but the tops are dry, and probably a good idea to get out there and rake some of that dead grass out of there so that you're not building up a thatch layer. But fertilization should be, if you're just using straight fertilizer, should be done as soon as the lawns start to green up a little bit, because grass grows mainly in the spring and the fall. Now with crabgrass preventer, you don't want to put that on that early, because the crabgrass has to have soil that's 55 degrees or a little above that for the seed to germinate, because crabgrass comes from seed every year. It goes from seed to seed, and it germinates in the areas that are bare. If it's in a thick lawn, you won't get much crabgrass growing, because the bluegrass or the fescue that you have growing there will definitely outcompete that crabgrass, and so it won't have a chance to germinate. It's where you have areas that the grass is a little thin, where the sun can reach the soil. It's a perfect spot for crabgrass. Crabgrass preventer should be put on about the time the forsythia bloom, and that's usually mid-April. The crabgrass preventer is a germination inhibitor that has about 6 weeks of effectiveness. And so if you put it on too early, before the soil is warm enough for that seed to germinate,
Right.
you've lost some of the weeks of prevention. So you want to wait until the forsythia is in bloom. That's usually a good sign. And then you want to get it on right away, because once the crabgrass is germinated, germination inhibitor does not work. So you've got to get it on before the crabgrass seed germinates, but not so early that you lose some of the effectiveness of that crabgrass preventer.
And I mean, that's why it's important to come see you guys, because you guys know this information. You can
Yep.
share that information. Otherwise, if you just go pick it up and read the bottle yourself and don't know what it says or don't understand what it's trying to tell you, you might make those mistakes. I do want to ask you about our own teammate here, Wade Bates, did something a couple weeks ago. He could see his lawn because there wasn't snow and there wasn't other stuff on the lawn. And he had a spot where an old trampoline had been.
Right.
And so he threw down some fresh soil, and there was some sand there, and he raked it all together to kind of mix it up. And then he threw down, I think he said, an entire bag of grass seed in this one spot. Was it too soon to get that grass seed down?
No, because the seed will not germinate until the temperature is correct in the ground. And so a lot of people actually, in fact, I did this at my daughter's new house. There's an area that has no grass.
Okay.
And so after Thanksgiving, we seeded it down and put mulch on top of it. And the grass seed will not germinate in cold soil. But as soon as the soil is warm enough for that seed to germinate, it'll germinate naturally. And that's a good way to get the grass seed going.
Okay. And so in his case, I know he said that he didn't do much over. He didn't put any mulch or anything on top of the grass seed. He just kind of threw it down and raked it in a little bit.
That's exactly what he should have done, and then pack it down a little bit. And then if he really wants to be good, get some straw, some clean straw, and put that on top. And that will keep the soil from drying out if we get enough water to have that seed start to germinate, because the only thing that really kills grass seed is to have it start to germinate and then dry out. So by having a layer of straw on top of that, it keeps that soil, a mulch tends to keep things static.
Right.
And so if you've got a nice layer of moist soil there and you have straw on top of it, even if you get a lot of wind that would normally dry the soil out, that straw will keep it moist, and then the seedlings will come through that straw, and then you just leave the straw there because that decomposes and it will add organic matter to the soil.
Should he be doing any sort of watering once it starts to germinate and come up?
Only if it's hot and dry,
Okay.
you know.
Otherwise, natural rain and natural moisture should be
Right.
enough.
But if you are starting a new area and you are seeding it and you do have hot dry, that's when you do want to water every day so that you don't get the drying out of the soil. But with established lawns, once a week is fine as far as watering. And then you let the water run for a while because you want to get that soil moisture down into the soil so that the roots have to go down to get the grass, and that will ensure that when we get the hot, dry weather, you'll have roots that are going deep enough to pick up the moisture that'll keep your lawn nice and green all summer long.
Well, there you go. Obviously, we're not thinking about mowing anytime soon because, like you said, the grass is kind of dormant and brown. Are there other things we can be doing to kind of help prepare now to give us that green lawn when we get there?
Just getting that thatch off, raking it up, getting the leaves and, anything that's left over from last year off the lawn, because you do want that sunlight to penetrate and get that soil warmed up so that the grass does start to grow. Because the quicker the grass grows, the less problem you're going to have with weeds and other things in your lawn.
Is it too early in the season to be doing aeration or rolling?
I think it is. I think you want to wait at least until the frost is out of the ground before you do that.
Do we know roughly when we think the frost will be out of the ground? I know you're not a weatherman.
Well, from what I understand, their top 6 to 8 inches is pretty frost free. But if you go deeper than that, because we had a very open winter, the frost did go down pretty deep this year. And so I would say, with the 20th of March right now, if we don't get a lot of cold weather, I would think around the first week in April is when things will start to green up. And that's when you can start doing all that stuff outside.
I like it. I did have a question for you about, because we always hear people calling us generally in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And we get these calls a lot where people say, Dick, I got an apple tree that didn't produce, a pear tree that didn't produce, whatever. And we've talked about the things that they can do. Is there anything they should be doing in the spring to help those fruit trees?
No.
It's too late?
It's too late. You have to wait until midsummer, and that's when you do the girdling or the baseball bat that I'm famous for. Yeah.
Big fan of that advice.
Yeah, and you don't want to do that before the tree has started to grow real well, because you do want the first 2 or 3 years of that tree being transplanted. You do want the first 2 or 3 years to not have fruit, because you want to get the root system established and get the tree off growing right. And then if after 3 years of being in the ground, if the tree is growing well, it means it's still juvenile. That's when you want to shock it by by girdling it, with a carpet knife, going halfway around the tree or 3/4 of the way around the tree, not taking any bark out. You got to make a very sharp incision, but that's enough to put the tree under stress, and that will shock it from its juvenile into its adult stage. And see, you have to do that. You can't do it in the springtime, because the flowers on fruit trees and most things are initiated in the fall. And so by doing it in the spring, you're not doing anything, because you won't get initiation of fruit buds in the spring. It happens in the fall. So you have to do it late spring, early summer, and that way the tree will have the chance to recover. And then when it starts going dormant in mid to late August, early September, that's when the fruit buds are set. And you can go out right now, and if you've got an apple tree or a fruit tree or a lilac or any plant, if you can go out right now and you can predict what buds are going to be flowers and what buds are going to be leaf buds, because the flower buds will be fat and they're usually at the end of the branch, or they're on a spur, and the leaf buds are sharp and more slim, and so that's the way you can tell if a plant is going to flower or not.
Next question I have for you, and this is something that I was having a discussion with my wife about, trimming trees and trimming like roses or bushes or things in your yard. When should we be looking at doing that?
Right now. Yeah, now is a good time to get out and get those, get the trees thinned down. A good rule of thumb my dad used to say is you should be able to throw a hat through the tree and not touch a branch, because you want to get it very open, and you should start doing that training when it's young, so that you're not, you wait too long, and what happens is the tree gets shocked too much, and then it forms what are called water sprouts. And water sprouts are not very productive. And so as a tree gets older, the more you prune it, the more the water sprouts you get. So what you want to do with fruit trees is when the tree is about 4 to 5 feet tall, you want to take the leader out, cut the top 2 inches out, and then that stem should start shooting out branches. And you want to take branches that are more horizontal than vertical.
Right.
Because that way the tree will spread out and you'll have much more and much better sunlight penetration. And the more leaves it has, the more sunlight you can capture, the more fruit you're going to have and the better fruit you're going to have. So you want to get 3 to 5 lateral branches in sort of a whorled arrangement so that you don't have one right on top of the other.
Right.
And then just let those branches spread out. And if they're too vertical, you can actually either put a spacer between the trunk and the branch and actually push the branch down so it is more horizontal, or you can put a stake in the ground and actually physically pull the branch down and leave it tied to that stake through the summer and fall. And usually by the end of fall, that branch has pretty much been set into that horizontal position. And then you just kind of let it go from there.
Reminder for anybody who wants to call in and talk to the garden doctor. If you have a question, you can call or text 885-4446 or 887-9595, the 9595 number being calls and texts. So it's definitely better to train those when they're younger.
Yes. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And I guess what makes sense what you're saying, because when I drive by like an apple orchard, the trees are not super tall and full of apples. They're very stout and very wide.
Right. And that's the way that you get a better crop. And with shade trees, it's the opposite. With shade trees, you want to get that central leader going as high as possible because if you get a forked leader, one where you get a Y in that leader too low in the tree, it tends to make a very weak crotch. And when we get ice storms, that can break in that crotch. So even if the tree looks a little deformed, you should take two of those out so that you keep that central leader going as high as possible. And then the other thing you got to remember with trees is that the branches on a tree will never get any higher on the tree once it's 2 inches below the top of the tree. There's no upward extension in a tree trunk once it's 2 inches below the top. So if you've got a branch that's 2 to 3 feet off the bottom from the ground, you probably want to take those off because they're not going to get any higher, and it's going to be harder to mow around that tree and to keep it looking good. And maybe for the first couple of years you leave it on so that it helps get that tree established.
Right.
But once the tree is established, those lower branches should come off. And what you do is you cut them as close to the trunk as possible without injuring. There's a area of cell division right next to the trunk that's called a collar, and it's very, very visible. I mean, if you look on any tree, you'll be able to see it.
It looks like a little ring around it.
It's
almost.
like a ring around it, exactly. And you want to cut it as flush to that collar as possible because what happens is that area of cell division will actually kind of roll over that cut surface so that as the tree grows in diameter, that place where that branch came out actually disappears because that cell division has rolled over that injury, and that'll make the tree much stronger.
I remember as a kid helping my grandfather. He had a whole line, actually double line of pine trees on his property.
Right.
And he wanted to be able to mow around them eventually. And
Right.
so they did as they grew up. They did take off the lower branches. And the one thing I remember being told when I was helping to do it was cut the branch out further first, get that off, get the weight off the branch,
Right.
then cut closer to the trunk
Right.
because you don't want it to rip and tear. You
It'll
want
tear the
clean
bark
cut.
off, yeah.
Right.
So you take the weight off. If it's a larger branch, you take the weight off by cutting it off a couple of feet from the trunk. And then you take a saw or whatever you're going to use and cut it off near the trunk. And that way, you know, if you don't do that, you usually start from the top. And when it gets to the point where that branch is too heavy, it'll just rip the bark out. And then you've got another injury to deal with.
Right. So let's take it from trees. Now let's move this into our flower beds. And I'm thinking, like, my parents have raspberries. You know, is now a good time to be trimming those back as well, or should we have done it in the fall?
It's better to do it in the fall, but now is the time to get out there. And you can tell which ones you should prune out. With raspberries, the canes that fruited last summer, if it's a June-bearing variety, those canes will be dead. I mean, they'll be black or dark brown, and they'll be very visible as far as which ones you should prune out. And then the canes that are for the fruit this summer will be a little green or a little red, and you just leave those. And what I tell people is that you want to trim the tops of those fruiting canes back until they're about the size of a diameter of a pencil, because anything above that's thinner than that not going to have a good fruit bud on it. And so by cutting them back a little bit, you're going to get a much nicer fruit crop. If they're ever-bearing varieties, you could have cut them all off at the fall, but right now, because they're still there, I would do the same thing as you do with the summer-bearing ones. Takes the ones that have the nubs on it that are brown and dead, take those out, and then I would say early to mid-April, give them a shot of fertilizer so that they start to grow. And then what you'll find is that with the red and yellow raspberries, the sprouts that are coming up for next year's crop will have a lot of nutrients to get going.
Now, let's move to roses, because I got roses in my flower bed. And I know last year when the fall hit, we didn't get out there. We didn't try and prune or anything in the fall. Now the wife's wondering, should we be cutting back the climbing rose? And I'm sure we should be training it, because we didn't last year, so it's just kind of everywhere.
The climbing roses you should not do anything with, because the climbing roses are a little bit different than the bush roses. The climbing roses actually are like the fruit trees. They blossom and blossom and form their flowers on the wood that grew last summer, where the hybrid teas, the grandifloras, the floribundas, the shrub roses, they blossom and blossom and form the hips on new growth. And so what I do in the springtime with my roses is when I uncover them, first thing I do is I inspect them so that, if I would imagine this winter we had a lot of dieback because it was such an open winter, but you go back on the roses to where the brown meets the green or the black meets the green, because it means that the area beyond that green area is probably dead. Right. If the whole thing is green, what you want to do again is trim it back to pencil diameter, and you can, if you've got a lot of branches, thin out the very weak branches, because you want the plant to start growing from strong buds, and that way you'll get much nicer growth. And roses are heavy feeders. They require more fertility, and so as soon as they start to grow, it's good to get a rose fertilizer and treat the roses with that. And we actually fertilize my roses like every 2 to 3 weeks, and until the early part of August, and that's when I stop fertilizing them, because you don't want to continually fertilize roses, because then they kind of are happily growing along and they love that extra fertility, and they don't start to go dormant fast enough, and so that's when you get a lot of winter dieback. So roses are heavy feeders. You want to feed them every 2 to 3 weeks through the growing season, but you want to stop about the 1st of August so that the plant goes dormant naturally. And with roses, that works really, really well.
All right. Well, that's all really good information. Unfortunately, we're already coming to the end of our show, so we got to take a moment to ask you again to share with everybody how do they find you guys? How do they get a hold of you if they
Okay.
have questions, if they want to come shopping, whatever?
Well, store hours in the Madison, Sun Prairie, Stevens Point are 9 to 6 Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 Saturday, and 9 to 4 on Sunday. This is the spring hours, which we're starting tomorrow. Randolph is really easy, 8 to 5 Monday through Saturday. And of course, Randolph, we're not open on Sundays. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of really good stuff. I've got a really good supply of bare root, but if you've missed some plants that you wanted by shopping later in the season, you know, now's the time to get in there. You can keep those bare root plants for probably 3 weeks by just keeping them in a cool area, keeping the roots moist by putting some water in the packing material, and then as we talked about at the beginning of the program, you soak the roots for 24 hours and plant them. And then after you've planted them, you want to keep the soil around the plant moist, so a bucket full of water every day, every other day, depending on how hot and dry it is, for about a week to 10 days, because that's how long it takes for a plant to start coming out of dormancy and growing new root systems. And then after that, it's like twice a week, and then for a couple of weeks, and then after that, it's once a week.
All right. I like it. Well, Dick, I want to thank you again for taking the time to come on and see us. We look forward to talking
Yep.
with you next week,
Very
where we'll
good.
learn even more. This has been a paid program. The advice and opinions expressed during the program are solely that of Jung Seed, not necessarily WBEV or Good Karma Brands.